Well, welcome to Coffee with Chuck. I have a very special guest today, Charlie Goldstein. He's a special guest in particular because he was my very first interviewee back in October of last year. And Charlie, who's a member of the Lakers Toastmaster Club in Minneapolis and serving as VP of Public Relations this year, shared about his journey in Toastmasters and told me how his club is working to overcome a lot of the same challenges that many of our other clubs are facing as well. And then I heard back from Charlie last month, and he forwarded over an article published in Hennepin Lawyer magazine. It was an article that he co-published with his daughter, Emily, and it was on the topic of losing passion in your career. And the article was specifically addressing those that are in the law profession, but when I read through the article, I thought, there's a lot of commonalities here with what we do in Toastmasters in terms of facing these crises, whether at the start of a career or mid-career. How do we self-assess ourselves? How do we retool? How do we leverage the networks that are available to us to get feedback? And so with that as the premise, I asked Charlie if he would come back and talk to me again. And without any further delay, please welcome Charlie Goldstein. Welcome back, Charlie.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Thanks for having me.
And
my coffee is ready for you.
Okay.
Sitting in a coffee shop in Big Lake,
interesting location today. I understand you're in a coffee shop in Big Lake, Minnesota.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's a fantastic location. So just we'll give our listeners a little heads up that if we hear a coffee machine in the background, that's just business as usual there. So
Right.
Let's start off with the article, which speaks to mid-career challenges. And as the world changes, we feel burned out. Can you talk from a personal perspective what that's all about and what that entails?
Sure. Well, Chuck, I was at it for more than 25 years as a divorce attorney. A lot of areas of litigation prior to that included divorce, but I wound up being in divorce law primarily for about 20 some years and had a law firm. And I had a lot of the same issues that I faced as an attorney over the years in my cases, with occasional highlights of unique issues. There are many along the way, always unique people. But the freshness of a new avenue became a necessity to keep life fresh because it was a very preoccupying career around the clock. It became hard to sleep over time because I had so much in my mind with employees and cases. But at the same time, even though there was a lot of excitement and a lot of challenge, the same issues repeated over and over again. How much spousal maintenance should someone receive? What was this budget? What was that budget? Some of those things became a little banal over the years, and I needed a different kind of framework to think in. Not only for the substance, but also for the ways of thinking, the ways in which a person approaches day-to-day life. And career coaching for me became that because it's much more in the counseling approach and the personal level than on the legal level. So that's why I evolved out of the law practice and into doing career coaching, for example. And in between, I had a couple of reinventions prior to that as well. So I really like the idea of reinventions.
That's a great introduction. So you have that long experience working as a lawyer, and that now it informs your career as a life coach. So I think that's fantastic, which is a fantastic segue to talking about Toastmasters and how it can be a beneficial resource for us. For example, dealing with sudden workforce changes and adaptability. I wonder if you can talk to how we adapt using these new forms of communication, such as Zoom.
Okay. Let me first address, Chuck, that you referenced being a life coach. I do career coaching, which is different than life coaching.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Career coaching is very specific as to a person's vocational needs, vocational desires, what kind of job is right in what industry, and it may be something different than the person has done their entire life. And they're now going to pursue, for example, a passion they never had pursued in the past. So life coach is much broader. How somebody can be a life coach, I don't know. I think life's all a mystery and the rest is guesswork overall. But career coaching is really exploring those specific areas. So I wanted to make that clear.
That's
so relative to different. I think you asked about different communication avenues we use. So in Toastmasters, you have certain precepts in Toastmasters I've been used to over the past 30 years of being a Toastmaster. But the Zoom, of course, is a much newer phenomenon that we've experienced because of COVID. And a lot of people aren't coming to Toastmasters now because they have what they're referring to as Zoom fatigue. They've been doing it all day at work. They've had enough. They don't want to keep staring at the screen, which is totally understandable. But for the person who's not yet experienced Toastmasters, it's a great way to get involved because you don't have that nervousness that a lot of people have speaking to a broad group of people in person. Some people even freeze up in the beginning on Zoom, but it's not nearly as, I don't want to say humiliating, but it's easier to get through that when you're speaking on Zoom, I think. And a lot of people now need to improve at Zoom. Many people, we still have to remind, take yourself off mute, blah, blah, blah. So especially in the beginning of the pandemic, people were learning better how to use Zoom in a group through Toastmasters, which is a real supportive environment. It's not the kind of environment where you're going to be kicked down for making a mistake. You're taught through performance improvement and more improvement and more performance ongoing on and on as to how you can better perform as a speaker so that you do better extemporaneously and in formal speaking environments.
Well, that's a great answer. I think after a year, particularly those of us in Toastmasters, we've become pretty adept at working in our meetings on an online format. But at some point in the near future, we're all going to have to transition back to something that resembles the world that we knew or we accepted before. And it's being described as hybrid meetings. Do you have any thoughts on that? How that's all going to be managed?
Sure. I've heard about this phenomenon now. A lot of people have been inside for so long, cloistered into their own home, are having some hesitance getting back out there because they've become so used to not having the challenges of person-to-person communication. It's a little intimidating people, even who were out there before, doing a lot of that. So for those who are introverted and didn't like to communicate so much in person versus being on Zoom, they're especially doubly challenged now because they have to get out of that mindset and get out there again and be interpersonal eventually. So Toastmasters is a great way to warm back up to that. And I've been promoting hybrid meetings. I'm having a hard time convincing people to come back and meet in person. But the comfortable thing is you can come to a meeting in person if you'd like in our group and still be on Zoom if you'd like to be on Zoom. So we're setting the computer on the conference table. Those who want to be on Zoom can be on Zoom. Those who are sitting at the conference table can be live again. And we're making sure everybody, of course, that's there in person has been vaccinated and keeping the distance from each other. Mm-hmm. But with those things in place, there really is no reason not to be back and performing in person. Some can be in Zoom, some can be in person. This way, people are getting used to it again without the intimidation of being in person or the threat of being in person with people who might be communicable, and they're able to stay on Zoom for as long as it's comfortable. So it so happens at my apartment, we've got a nice big conference room. People can be seated 10 feet apart. But I'll be honest, our group was large before this pandemic happened. We had about 25, 30 people in the group. The group had been around since I think it was the 1960s. So for about 60 years, the group's been around. It's about the oldest. Our group, the Lakers, has been around the longest, I think, of any Toastmasters group in the state, if not the region. And there are people, there's one fellow in particular who's been with the group since the beginning, pretty close to the early 60s. So you've got the diehards, and you've got people who were fairly new in the group, and they just dropped once COVID hit, and so many other activities in society. And I'm not in any way being judgmental of those who've dropped out, but they better get back in or they're going to pay the price. So especially for those who are exploring the idea of Toastmasters, now is actually an ideal time to jump back in and go hybrid, see how you like Toastmasters in person or on Zoom. Eventually, I'm hoping everybody's off the Zoom, but I'm sure we'll keep that option open because some people just find it so convenient, especially in the Minnesota winter, to be able to stay home and off the roads in the wintertime. So it's an ideal time to get involved with Toastmasters.
Right. Well, certainly one advantage of Zoom is, or some kind of online format, is that it allows us to maintain those relationships and allows us to continue our networking. And that's something that you addressed in your article as well, the importance of leveraging those relationships to help us as we build our careers. I wonder if you could kind of speak to the networking part of it in our evolving workplace.
Right. Well, there are many ways in which networking skills are paralleled in Toastmasters. Almost everything you do in Toastmasters has to do with communicating ideas to a diverse audience and networking with people, not just from the standpoint of, how are you doing? My name's so-and-so, 30-second elevator speech. It's not that effective necessarily. You build a lot of trust in Toastmasters because you perform certain duties, you do a good job with them. You show them you can be a good grammarian and make comments on people's grammar. You can be a good evaluator. And so over time, you really develop trust in people's communication modes. So if you're going to send a client to somebody, now you know how they communicate. Now you know how they deal with grasping subjects that they speak about. You can pick any subject you want to speak about in Toastmasters. Nobody restricts you in that way. There are a lot of opportunities available through going through various manuals to have some focus on the types of things you're saying. But overall, what you're doing is very much similar to networking skills, but in a much more structured and practical and conducive environment to improvement. you can go to 50 networking events and you might make the same mistakes all the way through and nobody tells you. Nobody in a networking event is going to say, Charlie, when you talk only about yourself, you're turning everybody off.
Mm-hmm.
And in Toastmasters, they'll tell you that in no uncertain terms. So for example, last night at our meeting, I asked extemporaneous speech topics having to do with honesty. And all of my questions were about lying, because I thought that was the flip side of the coin. And somebody afterwards said, Charlie, nice job, but all your questions were about lying, not about honesty. I'm still thinking about that one. So there's some very challenging people. Also, he said that he felt like he was being cross-examined about lying in the past. So people aren't afraid to jump in and give you some constructive criticism, point out things that even your best friends may not tell you. And then you walk away from that with your ego intact enough in the improvements that you're being told to take on, but enough constructive criticism that you're actually going to improve the next time you communicate with people in Toastmasters or in the community at large. So I think you can't go wrong improving your networking through Toastmasters in a lot of ways.
Yeah, what you said about evaluations, I think we've all been the beneficiary of some honest evaluations through the years, and it really does help us. COVID-19 is just yet another example of how external forces can force us to reevaluate ourselves and what we need to do. And I was wondering, what are some of the things that we can do to retool or reinvent ourselves?
Well, Chuck, reinvention is not a new term, but it's especially applicable to now because so many people, of course, are in a career that's become outmoded due to COVID. I sometimes wonder if retail is going to be eventually out the window because so many retail stores are closed now that have been around forever. So people have to retool in major ways. It takes searching of both the self and the work environment. So for example, as a career coach, I make a study of both the inside and the outside. And as they say in the I Ching, he would be happy or she would be happy who is constantly changing. So reinvention and change and happiness can all go hand in hand. By reinventing oneself, there's a lot about it that's scary, a lot about it that's difficult or even miserable, but it's necessary for many in today's work environment. And navigating that is really something you have to deal with carefully because it can wreck a person to reinvent in the wrong direction or do it the wrong way. So I like to say there are no wrong roads to anywhere. You're going to get somewhere in whatever road you're on.
Right.
This may not be the right road or the road to where you want to go, or maybe what's more circuitous than it needs to be. So you have to really carefully reinvent. So of course, if you're reinventing, starting fresh, you need to reinvent yourself in the right area. Now, historically, there are a lot of people who had to reinvent many times over. And I've learned and read about many people who reinvented themselves 4 or 5 times over. And some are moderately successful. Say Ray Kroc of McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
He was a cup salesperson starting out. He was a jazz pianist. I'm sure I'm getting the right person here, but that's true of him. He also sold what he called multi-mixers, a product that he sold. And when he got an order for 8 from a little company called McDonald's, he decided to buy it for 1% of revenue, something to that nature. And eventually went on to head McDonald's. And he had about 3 other careers along the way. So he was constantly reinventing. George Fraser was a great boxer. He won the World Heavyweight Championship. He reinvented in the area of becoming a pastor after he won the championship. 10 years later, came back to boxing. He won the heavyweight championship again from Muhammad Ali. Then he reinvented again, and he got into the countertop barbecue business.
Right.
And doing that, he made in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So reinvention sometimes is not an unfortunate thing that somebody has to bear through on a permanent basis. It might be on a temporary basis. Sometimes it brings huge fame and fortune. And in my mind, realization of passions, and that's what can really be the icing on the cake. You can really satisfy yourself in the greatest of ways by reinvention. One of my favorite examples too is Michael J. Fox. He evolved out of his acting career when he acquired Parkinson's disease and went into research and study and speaking on Parkinson's. And now he's raised hundreds of millions of dollars for the Parkinson's cause. Mm-hmm. There's so many other examples. Ronald Reagan, many others I like to talk about.
Those are a lot of great examples, Charlie. And I would think that for many of us, getting different professional certifications are an example, but how can we use Toastmasters to help build new skill sets?
Well, you do have manuals. In fact, we've just revamped all the manuals. When I say we, I don't mean our club, but on a nationwide basis. And so you can pick the path you want to take on Toastmasters. In fact, they call it Pathfinders. And Pathfinders allows you to pick one of
I think you mean pathways.
Pathways, that's right.
Pathways, there we go.
Yep, so in Pathways, You're following a path to eventual speaking goals you have for yourself. It's not about a path to a certain place or career, but it's a path to a certain style of speaking in a certain area. For example, maybe it's humor. Maybe you want to be a humorous speaker. So whether you're looking to become a professional speaker or just speak better day to day, that Pathways manual will take you where you want to go. Some people don't follow the manuals. They go more for the pleasure of Toastmasters. I got involved originally in Toastmasters for the fun of it. I've always stayed involved for the fun of it. And I'm finally getting to the point where I want to get out there and do some more professional speaking, so that this is a great avenue for that. And now I can use the manual to get to the right pigeonhole of speaking that I'd like to get to. Before this, I followed the manuals kind of loosely. I picked certain speeches and objectives. So you can be as casual about this or as formal as you want. All that matters is you show up to the meetings, you give good evaluations that are positive of other people, you do your best with your grammar and so forth, but nobody's going to say you're out of the group poor grammar. They're just going to give you some help. Some people that are eloquent, they're good in their jobs, they're saying like or all the time, which drives me crazy. Right. These people are learning not to do that now. And it really, some of these simple things can really improve your speaking style and make you a persuasive person, more so professionally and personally as well. So it can make you a better spouse, it can make you a better friend, and you'll have a better social life because you are becoming a better speaker. And that's the linchpin of so many things in life, is to speak well.
Well, Charlie, I think you really spoke eloquently about the benefits of the Toastmaster program in general, but also what we can benefit by each and every meeting that we go to and all of the interactions that we make in Toastmasters. So with that, I thank you. You have just given a great overview of the benefits of Toastmasters as we deal with the various challenges in our careers, whatever point that we're in.
Who's ever out there who's been involved with Toastmasters ought to come back, and those who aren't involved yet ought to get involved. And please do.
Okay, I love that message. Thank you so much, Charlie.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right.
Thanks again for having me.